Well, good Tuesday, everybody. Most of you are back to work as I record this. Not me. Well, I guess this is work here at home on the PC. And I just want to first bring you up to date on Hurricane Dorian, which has weakened now to Category 2 status. Top winds down to 110 miles per hour, and it has begun to move after spending more than 48 hours over Abacos Island and Grand Bahama Island. And we still do not have a good handle on the amount of devastation which has been occurring there. It is, in fact, not yet done entirely with the Bahamas, but it has begun to move toward the northwest at a big fat 2 or 3 miles per hour. That motion will remain slow through the day, and here is the updated track and intensity forecast from the National Hurricane Center as of midday today. And the area you see here in red on the Florida coast from Jupiter Inlet north almost to the Georgia border is a hurricane warning. The hurricane warnings are still up for this portion of the Bahamas as well. And a hurricane warning has been issued for the southern 2/3 of the South Carolina coast. The blue is a storm surge warning. And then there is a hurricane watch for the rest of the Carolina coast, including the Outer Banks, where my wife and I just vacationed in Ocracoke Island until a couple of days, 3 days ago, and also Pamlico Sound and the immediate east side of the mainland of North Carolina, including places like Morehead City. That's a hurricane watch. Now, there is a tendency when someone like me says it has weakened to or been downgraded to Category 2 that, this is going to turn out to be a big nothing. Well, first of all, it already has been an absolutely devastating disaster with still unknown destruction in the Northwest Bahamas. But what is occurring at this time is the hurricane actually is broadening in its diameter, in its size, its circulation. Now, I generally on this track forecast leave this center line off because it implies a certainty in the track. This is kind of a mean of all the different track forecasts from many models and their ensembles with multiple runs of the models. And the single center line implies a certainty to many segments of the public, not meteorologists so much, that just doesn't exist. The storm still could deviate just a little left of that center line, which would bring hurricane force winds to the immediate east coast of Florida, not in Miami or Fort Lauderdale, but from Jupiter Inlet north, especially around Cape Canaveral up to Jacksonville. So there could be Category 1 strength winds developing there later today and tonight. And the forward motion, I want you to look at some of these time signatures. This is the current position, still over the Bahamas, 11 a.m. as I record this. It's not until 8 a.m. tomorrow that the hurricane draws nigh, hopefully offshore from Cape Canaveral on the central Florida coast, not far from Melbourne, Florida. Not until 8 p.m. tomorrow that it gets up to the Florida-Georgia border. This is creeping, crawling motion, which means the storm surge, such as it is, and tremendous wave action producing significant and damaging beach erosion on the east coast of Florida will continue hour after hour. So when I say it's down to Category 2, the analogy I've drawn many times is we make a pretty big fuss if there is a brief gust during a severe thunderstorm to 75 miles an hour in any part of our western New York area. This is many hours of tropical storm to possibly hurricane force winds along the shoreline with just the duration of the constant wave action, which increases in its ferocity during high tide. And let's take a look at tropical storm wind probabilities. So we're going to click up on a different graphic. And the color purple indicates virtually a 100% chance of winds of 39 to as much as 74 miles per hour on the coastline here. The purple goes right up to the coastline. And then the reds, well, that's 80 to 90 and 70 to 80%. In other words, a very high probability. And that high probability extends all the way to duck which is at the northern end of the Outer Banks, than out to sea. There may be a beyond this, and again, we are talking about late in the week for the passage of this storm. Let's take a look for those of you with family or friends near the Carolina coastline. Let's go back to the timing for the passage of this hurricane. And we're looking here, for example, when it gets near Ocracoke Island, that's 8 a.m. Friday. And I'm recording this at midday on Tuesday. So there's going to be an increase in forward speed, but it's not going to just break out and race until it gets well off the coast. And at that time, it's anticipated it will be a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane. And so there is no such thing as a minor hurricane. And with the proximity of the path of the storm so close to the shore, these resort areas are going to suffer some real beach damage. The National Seashore, the Hatteras Seashore, are going to have some damage. There are dunes that may give way in places. So that's the basic picture. Nowhere near the worst possibility, which last Wednesday in some of the models had the storm making a direct landfall, crossing the peninsula and moving out into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where re-strengthening would have occurred. The Gulf is off the hook, and so, of course, is Alabama. I don't know if some of you heard a certain person on Pennsylvania Avenue included Alabama in the area at risk in a tweet 2 days ago, and Alabama was never even mentioned by the National Hurricane Center or anyone else. In fact, the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Birmingham, because of that tweet from Pennsylvania Avenue, had to issue a special statement saying Alabama will have no impact from Hurricane Dorian. Well, here is a loop that goes back, let's see, about 2 hours. This is Hurricane Dorian. The eye is no longer visible. It has become ragged. There is some weakening, but again, the wind field is expanding so that the actual outer edge of the tropical storm winds is increasing out here where nobody lives, essentially, but over to here where everybody lives. So there is going to be a significant impact, even if winds do not reach hurricane strength on the Florida shore. Again, crawling. It's going to take until tomorrow night for it to get up to northeast Florida. So this is going to be a long duration, damaging impact. Not the worst it could have been showing up in last Wednesday's models, but nothing to poo-poo, and only someone as an armchair general would consider poo-pooing this. Okay, let's talk briefly about our weather. We will have no impact whatsoever, but this was the Europeans' model's most recent run, and it continues to keep the center of the storm offshore. This is showing things at about 2 or 3 in the morning in the European model. Now, the ensemble of the European model, there are some ensemble members which bring this center closer to the shore. It has just that little bit of motion toward the northwest, and a motion closer to the shore cannot be eliminated. The Hurricane Center mentions that. And then as we move in time, it keeps the center off the shore. Now we're looking at tomorrow evening, and the storm has actually intensified tomorrow evening from where it is now, barometrically, well offshore, but still having an impact. And then its motion by Thursday morning, 7 a.m., off the South Carolina shore, but notice its path brings it closer, and it's still a pretty powerful hurricane at that point. So there still could be, there will be some storm surge flooding on the South Carolina shoreline, and some chance of hurricane force winds reaching the immediate shore, maybe Charleston. There will be tropical storm force winds, and then as we move it up to North Carolina, it comes closer to Wilmington, which is a good-sized city in the southern part of the coastal counties, and then it brings it right up to the Outer Banks, with a landfall possible in this model right around Cape Lookout. There's Ocracoke Island up there where we stayed. And then it finally begins to move out to sea with some it is going to cause some surf and wave problems on the northeast shoreline all the way to New England, but the impacts will be much less significant than in this area. Now, want to take a quick look at our situation. We're going to have a cold front approaching western New York toward morning. And with its approach after midnight, we have a marginal 5% risk of severe thunderstorms with damaging winds. And that risk is greater over the central Great Lakes here where you see the yellow. That's a 15% risk in that area, where there's even a 5% risk there, not here, of tornadoes. Our temperatures will tend to run below average beginning a little bit tomorrow, more so later in the week. Sunday looks like the coolest of the next 5 days with temperatures in the low 60s. Weekend looking pretty good. We might have a brief passing shower on Saturday with temperatures in the upper 60s. A little cooler but dry on Sunday, and there does, in my judgment, seem to be some reasonable hope. In fact, let's take a look before I sign off here at the upper air pattern over the next 2 weeks. And let's bring this down to a slow crawl. We go into this cooler pattern as we get toward the weekend. You see this little dip in the jet stream. There's a trough here, and that brings us our below average temperatures, which continue into Sunday. The brown here indicating warmer high pressure suppressed to the south, but notice it begins to make a comeback, this warm ridge of high pressure, by Tuesday, Wednesday, and we will have temperatures close to average. The average this time of the year, high temperatures in the mid-70s or above average much of the time into the middle of the month. And we only go out here a couple of more days, but it looks like our coolest period in September will, at least through the 20th, will tend to be late this week, part of the weekend, and early next week before warmer temperatures return. Okay, I have blathered enough, and hope you've enjoyed this YouTube, and we'll talk again soon.